Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm meteorologist Mike Ottenweller. Thank you for joining us tonight. You've tuned into Your Alaska Weather, brought to you by NOAA and the National Weather Service. Tonight, Monday, February 11th, 2019, and lots to talk about as we move into our active February pattern. 1-800-472-0391. That'll get you the automated line, and you can follow that for any forecast you would like. Also, to talk to a forecaster at the Juneau, Fairbanks, or Anchorage office. Weather.gov/Alaska is the website with a regional perspective, so that you can use point and click just to keep clicking into the map to see your forecast for your area of interest. And then if you need to get in touch with us here at the TV desk, there is the email, nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. So let's jump into it tonight. Lots to talk about. Our headlines. Very active pattern is going to continue. For those of you across western Alaska and across northern Alaska, you know that it has been a very messy pattern, and that has really hampered some things out there. So that is going to continue for the next couple days at least. South central and southeast Alaska, maybe not quite as busy, and that also will continue. So the pattern's not changing a whole lot, and where it's been bad, unfortunately, it will continue to be fairly bad. Coastal impacts, we're going to talk about some coastal flood advisories that we have out along the west coast, courtesy of that active pattern. Winter weather is going to be continuing for northern Alaska, and we'll look at our hazards map to get a better idea there. And then offshore flow for south central and southeast Alaska. Folks that know Alaska weather know that offshore flow means usually dry conditions, so precipitation, very quiet for you all, but as far as those winds, they will be gusty at times through some of the bays and passes. So looking at the hazards map, you can see here, it really tells a story stretched out from southwest all the way up to Kaktovik. Lots and lots of winter weather advisories in the yellow, and then winter storm warnings in the red. And these all range from blowing snow and falling snow to even some mixed precipitation with some freezing rain in pockets here near McGrath and the lower valleys. And then as we get up towards the Brooks Range and up towards the Arctic coastline, that's where it's more snow, blowing snow, colder air holding on up here, snow and blowing snow into these winter weather advisories here. All of these really range from coming down, expiring anywhere between Tuesday night and then Wednesday night, and then maybe even as late as into Thursday morning. Up here along the Kaktovik area and near Dead Horse, we do want to mention this is where we expect some of our worst conditions with snow and blowing snow. This isn't until Tuesday night at about 6 p.m. going until Wednesday at 9 p.m. Gust all the way to 65 miles per hour and zero visibility at times. So if you have any travel plans up there, Tuesday night into Wednesday night, be advised conditions are going to be deteriorating. And then also with this, we do expect about 20 inches of snow along the Brooks Range. This is just a very moist pattern, continuing to push moisture up into that range. So when it lifts up over the mountains, snowfall can be heavy at times, and expecting almost 2 feet of snow up there. The one advisory I do want to mention for Southwest Alaska is for our coastal flood advisory. This is from Hooper Bay down through Hazen Bay, and it's in effect now until 6 a.m. on Tuesday. It's for about a 2 to 4 foot water surge along the coastline there. So if you have interest or you happen to be out hunting off the coastline there near the sea ice, be advised, we do expect that onshore surge of water to really push in here and cause some impacts. Hard to determine exactly how the ice will interact with that water surging up, but it certainly is warranting an advisory for this area, and we also have a advisory in there along the Norton Sound area. It's covered up by our winter storm warning, but an advisory as well. So this whole area of the coastline, and we'll talk about that here on this slide. You can see coastal flood advisory in effect until Tuesday, until 6 a.m. on Tuesday, and it's really stretching out from Scammon Bay all the way down through Hooper Bay. And this here is a picture of looking at the shore-fast sea ice, and so that's where it's holding on, but that is not going to be enough, we don't think, to protect the coastline entirely from those impacts of that onshore flow. So again, 2 to 4 feet, and the shore-fast ice could be even shoved up there along the coastlines. So we really are looking at this area as our target area, maybe even a little bit further north up into Norton Sound, again favoring those southwest and west-facing coasts along the west coast of Alaska. All right, let's jump into our satellite now. So here's our monster low that is spinning out there that's causing the problems, slinging this, really it's kind of an occluded front at this point, but it's got some warm air still with it, and then trailing behind there is our cold front, and we'll see that here in just a minute on our surface map. So out ahead of that, it's actually been relatively clear across much of south central as we saw through the day today. Parts along the coastline especially clear, and down towards southeast Alaska. As this area of low pressure pulls away, we're starting to see wraparound dry air working in there as well. Let's look at that again. You can start to see things drying out across southeast, maybe some high clouds clipping in. And then as we look down towards the southern portions of the Bering and down into the North Pacific, that's where our next system is already starting to gen up, and it is going to slide here along the south side of the Alaska Peninsula into the Gulf of Alaska. So here's our system, 967 millibars and very, very broad in nature. That's really what causes that long duration of the southwest flow into the coastlines, and that's really where things start to deteriorate rather quickly. Long duration means that the water has time to pile up and pile up and pile up and so on. And so that's why we end up with those coastal hazards. Up along the northwest coast there, you can see plenty of moderate, maybe even some heavy snow at times, and blowing snow, which is creating all of those winter weather advisories and the winter storm warnings. Down towards Bristol Bay, a little bit warmer, and that's allowed things to improve there. So the blowing snow that was occurring along the YK Delta last night has expired, and we start to see some improving conditions as the air is just warm enough to turn over to some rain, maybe some rain, snow, but again, pockets of freezing rain in there as well. As we get out towards the Bering, that's where we have some strong cold air advection associated with this cold front. And as that slides across, those snow showers will be heavy and those winds will be gusty. We did have some reports in the warning level range greater than 75 miles per hour near the Pribilofs earlier today. There's our next warm front trying to work its way into the pattern. We'll talk more about that here in just a moment. Otherwise, just some mid and high clouds passing over eastern Alaska. And then as we get down towards southeast Alaska, this kind of weak inverted trough is sliding up into the area. And that's really just because we have colder air filtering offshore and helping to produce those clearer skies. There's that trough again, really looking for pretty quiet conditions for southeast tonight. But as we get towards southwest Alaska, that's where we have continued snow and blowing snow. That is going to continue to work its way up towards the Arctic coastline here. Now the low is is up a little bit to 977, but still a formidable strength for an area of low pressure. This area of moisture starts to creep into to the southern part of the south central area and the northern part of the Gulf of Alaska. That's where we expect a new area of low pressure to develop, courtesy of that cold air pulling through here. So beware of some gusty winds through bays and passes here near the Barren Islands and possibly into Prince William Sound. Then just those snow showers will continue out over the Bering as that next warm front starts to bring a mix of precipitation into the central Aleutians. So there's our area of low pressure that develops on Tuesday and slides quickly off to southeast Alaska. This could bring some freezing drizzle to portions of southeast Alaska with some cold air at the surface being overrun by warm air aloft, and then some more rain and snow for higher elevations as well. There's that northwest wind coming through those bays and passes, so mariners be advised. And then still plenty of snow and blowing snow up along the coastline here as this area of low pressure makes its way off to the northeast. Our next area of low pressure starting to spin through the Alaska Peninsula, bringing rain and snow and more snow out over the Bering. So as that low pulls away, that's where we expect those strong winds to wrap into near Kaktovik. Gusts of 65 miles an hour possible from 6 p.m. Tuesday until 9 p.m. Wednesday with zero visibility possible. Also expecting some really strong winds to pull through bays and passes here as this area of low pressure dives southeastward in the Gulf. So that'll have an impact across the Gulf Coast with winds really ramping up as we go into Wednesday and possibly bringing some more rain and snow to portions of southeast Alaska. Out over the Bering, well, not to be dismissed is our next system already queuing up, and that is going to bring us another round of weather as we go into the latter half of this week. So how about temperatures? Well, across southeast Alaska with a clear sky tonight, you all should be seeing temperatures pretty cold, mid-20s into the upper teens, possibly even low teens. Across much of southwest, that's where the warm pocket is, and for the Copper River Basin, single digits in some spots below zero, but really it's a fairly mild air mass across much of the state, especially as you get down towards the Alaska Peninsula. For southeast on Tuesday afternoon, expect your highs to be in the mid to low 30s. For south central, generally around the freezing mark, and up along the Arctic coastline there, that's where we're keeping things about the 20-degree mark. Southwest Alaska, you'll see it right around freezing again. for southeast on Wednesday morning, right around the freezing mark into the 20s. Colder air is going to start to return in earnest on Wednesday across much of the northern portion of the state. And as we go into the afternoon on Wednesday, don't expect things to warm up a whole lot unless you're in southeast Alaska. Cold air mass moving in.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Okay, welcome back. Let's move on up into your flying weather now. And as you can see here, not a lot of change from when we spoke even a few days ago. Mostly IFR conditions stretching from the Seward Peninsula all the way across the interior portion of the state there along the Brooks Range. And then just north of the Brooks Range, a small pocket of VFR conditions, but then it's followed very quickly again by MVFR and IFR conditions up along the Arctic coastline. Pockets of IFR where that moist flow is backing up against the passes and the terrain there. So IFR conditions for Lake Clark and Merrill on Tuesday morning. And then a wide swath of MVFR with a lot of low-level moisture out over the Bering Sea. Either leads to low stratus or possibility of fog at times. So MVFR conditions expected out there. Southeast, you'll start the day as VFR conditions and just a small pocket of MVFR across south central and the Gulf, as we do expect some low stratus to linger in this area. By afternoon, that improves. However, that area moves over towards southeast Alaska, so deteriorating conditions with southeast going to MVFR by Tuesday afternoon. As we look towards the Arctic coastline and western Alaska, you can see there those IFR conditions will persist. Still see those pockets of IFR conditions along the terrain where that moisture backs up against it. So Lake Clark and Merrill, not expecting a lot of improvement for you all there. And then a wide swath of MVFR conditions stretching from the Copper River Basin with low stratus out over the western portion of the state. Our next system is going to traverse right across the Alaska Peninsula there, and you can see that IFR pivoting through by Wednesday morning. So just clipping the southeast side of the Alaska Peninsula and then hitting the south side of Kodiak Island. MVFR conditions are going to continue to stretch out over the northern half of the state and again along the west coast and down through the eastern portion of the Bering. MVFR conditions. Southeast Alaska, still IFR conditions up for the higher passes, but otherwise generally MVFR conditions there with some low fog and stratus through the area. Our next system approaches, bringing IFR conditions back to western Alaska, or back to the western Aleutians, and then over the state. Start to see some improving conditions actually by Wednesday afternoon. VFR stretching from Utqiagvik all the way down through Bristol Bay, with just some pockets of MVFR interrupting that. Across the Gulf, area of low pressure stretches out, bringing IFR conditions, and still seeing those MVFR conditions across much of southeast Alaska for Wednesday afternoon. So for our passes, Adigan and Anaktuvik, you will be IFR through the day with that low moisture. These should be also IFR through the day, Lake Clark and Merrill, especially on the west side, lots of moisture moving in there, and so IFR conditions will be prevalent. Don't pay any mind to the VFR conditions there. Rainy, also going to be IFR through the day, and windy. Start to see some improvement as you get a little bit further from the west side of the state, so IFR becoming marginal visual flight rules. Isabel, you'll be marginal visual flight rules through the day, as well as Mentasta. Tanita, you'll start to improve pretty quick from stratus down in the area from MVFR up to VFR by the afternoon. In Portage, similar story for you all there. Some low-level moisture, but that burns off relatively quick. And Chilkoot and White, as we mentioned before there, you're going to be going downhill, VFR down to marginal visual flight rules. As far as our freezing level, you can see here, not a lot of surprise that the one spot over the mainland is in southwest Alaska, where we still see freezing levels above the surface. Otherwise, most of that warm air is confined out over the Gulf of Alaska and over towards Kodiak Island. A little bit more where it should be this time of year in February, and then still having the surface line down towards southeast Alaska. For our icing map, that looks like this. Lots of low-level moisture backing up against all the terrain and over much of the northern half of the state. Isolated moderate above 6,000 feet. Lots of warm air still hanging around with that system. And then above 5,000 feet with that next system starting to push moisture up against the Alaska Peninsula. Small pocket there above 3, and then isolated moderate above 4 for southeast Alaska on Tuesday. Tuesday's jet stream is going to be a west to east in general, moving either across the western Aleutians or coming up from the North Pacific, and really focusing on this area here at about 125 knots, pushing those systems onshore. Another area moving north at about 65 knots, and then it comes up and over this ridge, diving down in support of this low off of the west coast of the United States, and so therefore that northerly flow through southeast Alaska in the upper levels. Generally at 9,000 feet, it is going to be a westerly flow across much of the mainland, highlighting here in the interior all the way up to 55 knots, kind of a choke point there along the Alaska Range, and then another area of 50 knots at 9,000 feet south of this developing low. Going to be westerly flow, pretty strong through bays and passes, northwest 40 to 55 knots, and then calming down 10 knots out of the west for southeast. And then generally still that northwest flow through the Gulf becoming southwest. Still going to have a westerly flow over the mainland here at about 40 knots, and then about 40 knots in support of this area of low pressure. So watch out through bays and passes, and along the terrain you can expect considerable moderate below about 4,000 feet to 5,000 feet, and then another area below 5,000 feet.
On March 11, 2011, a powerful tsunami hit Japan, destroying cities and villages. As the water receded back into the ocean, it pulled what remained of buildings, cars, boats, and homes along with it. Scrap metals, plastics, and objects of all shapes and sizes either sank near the shore or floated away. In the days that followed, large masses of floating debris could easily be seen by satellite imagery and aerial photos. In the wake of this disaster, NOAA is assessing the potential impact that the debris may have on U.S. shores. So, where will this debris go, and when will it get there? To help answer those questions, scientists are using computer models to estimate the debris' path, using its starting location in the tsunami zone and historical weather and ocean conditions. The findings are that some debris could pass near or wash ashore in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands as early as this winter. Debris may also approach the west coast of the United States in 2013 and potentially circle back to the main Hawaiian Islands in 2014. But scientists caution that there are limitations to what computer models can tell us, now that the debris has moved out of satellite view. And with currents and winds in the Pacific constantly changing, there is no guarantee that the debris will stay on the predicted path. Items will sink along the way, or break up and disperse in many directions. Despite these unknowns, NOAA and its partners are collecting data, assessing possible impacts, and making preparations in case debris does wash ashore. The 2011 tsunami in Japan reminds us that the devastation that happens on land can also become a marine debris issue at sea.
Imagine all of this underwater. In a major tsunami, it could happen. In this part of Washington state, it's happened before, hundreds of years ago. Sometime in the future, it will likely happen again. But we can be ready. If a tsunami strikes, this school will provide a place for people to ride it out above the waves.
We're in Westport, Washington, and right behind me is the very first tsunami vertical evacuation center in the United States.
This is an emergency. Please walk to the nearest exit. Go to the stair tower and proceed up the stairs.
Tsunamis are a potential hazard for low-lying coastal areas. That's why many coastal communities have plans in place to get people to safety, high ground or inland, where they can be beyond the reach of a tsunami. Often there are signs showing where to go and where to gather. Most tsunamis are caused by underwater earthquakes along subduction zones, where two of Earth's plates collide and one is forced under the other. Westport and other Pacific Northwest coastal communities are especially at risk because one of these zones lies just offshore. It's called the Cascadia Subduction Zone. An earthquake here caused a tsunami in 1700 that flooded shores as far away as Japan. Experts say it's just a matter of time before it happens again. Since the subduction zone is so close, a tsunami like the one in 1700 could strike before people in some low-lying areas could get to high ground or inland. And Westport doesn't have a lot of high ground or easy routes inland.
If we get an earthquake or a tsunami, we're going to get a lot of water in the area really quickly, and we needed a place to go. So our community built this brand new school, and above our gym and cafeteria, we have a roof. And so the idea is that we'll get all of our students up, and anybody from the community who needs to get up, they can get up there as well.
Ocosta Elementary School might seem like a normal school, but look more closely. It's engineered to withstand monster waves. Tsunami vertical evacuation shelters must be able to resist the powerful forces that a tsunami brings. Hydrodynamic, buoyant, hydrostatic, and debris impact forces and strong currents. They're also designed to help people get to safety quickly.
There are 4 big staircases on each corner of the building, and each one of those staircases is 8 feet wide, and we can get the whole school evacuated in about 4.5 minutes.
Everybody should be at a 0.
On the roof of the building, there is water and food and buckets and shelters and tarps and blankets and different things so that we can be up there for 2, 3, maybe 4 days while we wait for rescue.
You can go to the top and you know you'll be safe. It feels really nice to have a special building because you feel protected.
This community decided that a tsunami evacuation center was important because they didn't have anywhere to go, and they decided to use their money to build the building. The additional cost is anywhere between 10 and 20% of the actual building cost itself, and that's really a sound investment for a lot of protection. You may be there a while, but you're safe and you're secure, and that's the most important thing.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
All right, let's jump on into your marine forecast now for February 11th, 2019. Sea ice analysis, thanks to Mr. Mike Lawson. As you can see here across Cook Inlet region, we still have had some slow and steady growth in this area here. We expect that to continue for the next 5 to 10 days. It's really out over western Alaska where we've seen that ice rapidly deteriorating because of those strong southerly winds, because of that warm air. What we want to highlight for you is with that southerly winds, areas on the north side of any peninsula are starting to open up. And so it's possible that as that happens, it could leave areas exposed. What is marginal ice could quickly dissipate. And so just be advised if you are trying to travel out in these areas, this is a very tenuous situation and could change really by the hour. And so that is why we have our coastal flood advisory out for several portions of the west coast from Norton Sound down through the YK Delta coastline there. And these are really in effect starting up along Norton Sound from 9 p.m. Tuesday until, 9 p.m. tonight until 6 p.m. Tuesday, and for the Hazen Bay to Hooper Bay area through here until 6 a.m. on Tuesday. Again, be advised in those areas for those coastal flood advisories. Sea ice is obviously being closely looked at. As we get into southeast marine forecast, you can see generally a southeast to south wind across the inner passageways, 10 to 15 knots and about a 2 to 3 foot sea. And then offshore waters, generally a west wind, 15 to 25 knots, and seas between 7 and 10 feet on Tuesday. On into Wednesday now, when we start to pick up our northerly flow through Lynn Canal, 20 knots, 4 foot seas, southeast winds for the southern sections, 3 to 4 foot seas, and 15 to 20 knots of wind. A little bit more confused out over the open waters. We start to see the dissipation of one system and the development of the next system. So it's west and south winds here, 15 knots, becoming easterly up there, 15 to 25 knots over the northern Gulf, seas between 10 and 11 feet. Now for South Central, you can expect that offshore flow that we talked about to be persistent, generally going to be between 15 all the way up to 35 knots here, gale force winds through the Barren Islands, and some freezing spray for southern portions of Cook Inlet and for the Barren Islands as well. Seas generally between 2 and 13 feet. As we get into Wednesday, expect more of a north and northwest wind, really starting to pick it up now across the Barren Islands, so more freezing spray through these areas. 20 all the way up to 45 knots here, and seas generally between 3 and 14 feet. As we get into the Alaska Peninsula, expect a west wind to northwest wind, 15 to 25 knots, and seas pushing up to 9 to 11 feet. A little bit stronger here north of Cold Bay at 18 feet. And then as we get into Wednesday, expect a northwest wind across the whole area, all the way up to 45 knots here southeast of Kodiak Island. Seas 17 feet there, 7 to 11 feet north of the peninsula. On into the Aleutian chain now. Expect generally a west wind behind that strong system across the area. Generally a west wind and going to be between 15 and 30 knots. Quite a bit calmer than we have been seeing. Seas are still going to be running fairly high, 14 to 18 feet across the area. Maybe a little bit more of an easterly flow with that area of low pressure skirting south of the Alaska Peninsula. But by Wednesday, our next system is already queued up, moving in here, southeast winds 55 knots, possibility of some stronger gusts, and seas climbing to 23 to 27 feet, and winds will respond to that system as it comes closer to the rest of the chain. It's generally seen 40 to 35 knots across the rest of the area, 11 to 13 foot seas. West coast, expect some freezing spray near St. Matthew Island, otherwise a westerly wind 20 to 30 knots, seas all the way up to 19 feet there near the Pribs. And a little bit more confused as things are between systems on Wednesday, generally 10 to 25 knots and seas 6 to 11 feet. All ice covered across the Arctic coastline here, but still some strong winds out ahead of our front. South winds 35 to 40 knots, and then generally a northwest winds as that low kind of bisects the area. Expect 20 to 45 knots across the Kotzebue Sound. Westerly winds really dominating on Wednesday now. Expect anywhere between 15 and 45 knots for the marine areas. So let's recap. Plenty of winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings stretching really from the YK Delta all the way up through Kaktovik and Dead Horse. The areas that we're most interested in, whereas the snow and blowing snow is going to continue to fall. Kaktovik and Dead Horse, you can expect that to arrive late Tuesday evening and continue into Wednesday. And possibility of up to 20 inches of snow for portions of the Brooks Range as this system moves through. Continues to move through the area on Tuesday. New weather maker developing over south of the Aleutian chain on Tuesday. And for southeast Alaska, you see a return to precipitation on Tuesday as well, with the possibility of some freezing drizzle getting back into your forecast. And then by Wednesday, this area of low pressure will increase the offshore flow through here and bring another round of rain and snow for lower elevations, snow for higher elevations, and blowing snow for the Arctic coastline as our low exits. Stay tuned for more active pattern. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.